Welcome to the Curious Conversation Collaborative, a community for purpose-seeking entrepreneurs, leaders, and changemakers.
Listen to inspiring conversations with your hosts, inner leadership mentor Tessa Van Keken and business wealth coach Karen Ravel.
In this episode, we are sharing an extract from an interview with Julia Barnickle, filmmaker, photographer, artist and writer, and who has, over the past 11 years, been living with breast cancer. In this interview, we talk about her philosophy on how life really is meant to be easy. We hope you enjoy it.
Okay, yeah. I mean, career-wise, I worked in information technology for roughly 20 years. Started off as a computer programmer and then got into business analysis and project management and team management. And Karen always thinks it's strange that I got into information technology because my background is languages. I studied French and German at university. With a little bit of Dutch, but my Dutch is terrible. When I try to explain how come I ended up in information technology, the two things I wanted to do when I was a teenager and get paid for was to travel and to use my language skills. So being a computer programmer used my language skills, because I learnt lots of programming languages, and eventually I got paid to travel to various parts of the world as well. So it kind of fulfilled my core desires. My job was made redundant, my last job, in 2003, and in 2005 I trained as a life coach. Started a business the following year, and I didn't have many clients. But I guess you can't expect to have many clients when you start out. But I felt that I did reasonably well working with the clients. And then in 2008, I was diagnosed with breast cancer for the first time, and it came back 3 years later. And 2 years later, and then it started spreading to other parts a year after that. So I've had 3 lots of primaries and 3 lots of secondaries. So I've been living with secondary breast cancer for the past 6 years, and it's defined as either incurable or terminal. You know, it's stage 4. There is no stage 5. But even now, I kind of say I've had and continue to have an easy life, because really it's about mindset. It's about how you approach things. And yes, it would be nice not to have cancer, obviously, but at the same time, I mean, I was thinking about this again over the past couple of days, and it's the same sort of question. You know, if I would say, okay, let's just put that, project that I am completely free of cancer, I am completely well and healthy, and there is no cancer at all. What would I do differently from what I'm doing now? You know, it's a bit like if I won the lottery, what would I do differently? Because as long as I'm able to do things I want to do, which some of the time I haven't been, especially over the past couple of years. I've had a lot of fatigue. But at the moment, I mean, I seem to have really good energy. I'm going to touch wood. If I can find some wood, there's some wood. So I am able to do things. And yeah. So that's, do I need to say anything else? Okay, have I missed anything that you think is important? Oh, I suppose one other thing is when I was 18, I had a bit of a meltdown last year of school, worrying about what I wanted to be in, for the rest of my life, which seemed to be important to everybody else. And I eventually, after about 6 months, I came to the conclusion that nothing in life is worth worrying about. And that's been my philosophy ever since, kind of thing. So I don't worry about things. And people always say, how do you do that? I don't know, you just don't worry, you just stop. Anyway.
I think that story in itself is already very interesting. And also, like, again, we do different kind of topics, sometimes more the, more related to particularly business element, if you like business models or the way we do business or sales or things, but also a lot of because mindset is always part of it, right? I think you already mentioned it, the way you are in that. And again, if life happens, like something like in your case, if you're diagnosed with cancer, then these things, they have obviously a huge influence on you and your business, because again, most of us as entrepreneurs and business owners, like small business owners in particular, to a large degree, we are our business in a way. So you can't really say my personal life, my business life, because it's kind of intertwined as well. And I think even the way you talk about it is really interesting, because that it shows so much. It's not only about what happens outside or to you, but also how you perceive that, how you experience that, and how you deal with that. Like the thing you also mentioned about worrying or not worrying.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, Karen knows a mutual friend called Leda, and I was going to be interviewed by the Daily Telegraph a few years ago, because somebody had brought out a book about introverts, and I had a business that was helping introverts in business. And I had a chat with her trying to figure out what I should talk about. And she said, what do you want to get out of it? And I thought, that never occurred to me. So I guess there are a couple of things that, if I could mention them, it would be good. In July, I'll be running a free online community project called Lessons from Lockdown. And it's all about how various people have found ease during lockdown. So I've invited a group of friends, at the moment I don't know how many, to write something, and I'll publish the essays in emails possibly every weekday, possibly more often, possibly less often. This is part of the ease thing. I've run a project in January, and it was just as chaotic. I described it recently as a bit like herding kittens, because I didn't really have a clue how many essays I was going to get or what they would be like or anything like this. But I got a bit stressed out in January, but this time I thought, no, this is part of ease. And I realised in January everything just worked out perfectly. I had exactly the right number of essays, and they arrived in exactly the right time. So, as I say, this time I just thought, okay, whatever. So that's one thing. And then I've been trying to figure out what it is that I want to do going forward. And this may or may not come out in the conversation anyway, but last week I realised, because I was on a kind of 5-day challenge, and I said I want to help people who are fed up with the hustle and the constant striving to achieve more, and they want to redefine success and invite greater ease into everyday life.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I'm at, I think. And I got into a bit of a panic after that, thinking, how am I going to do that? Especially if somebody says, how do I stop worrying? So, but then I realised, I was watching a Michael Neal thing this morning, and he was saying all you have to do as a coach is turn up, and there was the second part, but I can't remember what the second part was now. But it's kind of just trusting that the answer will come, or that something useful will come, which is really how I've lived my life. I've never planned. Somebody asked me a couple of days ago, have you really never planned, or is it something that you learned, you practiced? And I thought for a moment, I said, no, I've never planned. I can plan, like a short project for a month or something, I was a project manager in IT, so I had to project manage a couple of projects that lasted about a year. But I broke them down into little bits. And if somebody said to me, that bit we're doing in 3 months' time, what are your thoughts on that? And I just turned around and said, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
I think actually one of the interesting things comes because we very often ask the question, right? So what are your plans for the future? And in a way, already I could see a very interesting answer coming. Well, plan? I don't know.
So I don't plan.
So anyway, but look, we're not going to force it, but whatever way it comes. One thing that I think would be really interesting to hear is about, because you did mention the working with introverts.
I don't kind of say I only work with introverts, but I would say, on Facebook, a lot of the friends that I have came from the Facebook group that I used to have for the Quiet Entrepreneur. So the vast majority of my friends on Facebook are introverts, even people that I didn't think were introverts. They've kind of realised over time that actually, especially during lockdown, that yes, they are introverts because they're quite happy to be at home. And not have the pressure of socialising and that kind of thing. It's not necessarily that everybody's an introvert, but I think I attract calm people, or people who would like to be calm. And since I've been doing some videos over the past few months, just talking to camera, just waffling as I do, and people like the sound of my voice. They say it was very calming, very settling. So I think that's the thing that people like about me in particular. This kind of Zen thing going on.
And is that also something like the project you mentioned with the essays? Is that a theme in that as well, the calmness, the being Zen, or is it about?
It all started off 6 years ago. I wrote a short article or short essay for a friend's blog called "What If Life Were Meant to Be Easy?" And it wasn't a kind of, oh, if only life were easy. It was a, guys, you got it wrong. Life is meant to be easy. We think it's supposed to be struggle, but actually it isn't. It's, there's a different way of looking at it. And then last year in the summer, I started thinking about it again because I hadn't done anything with it. I wanted to write a book, but I couldn't think of anything else to say somehow. It was like, yeah, I said it all. So I actually joined a few community programs as an author last year, 3 in fact, friends of friends that I didn't know, but I just liked the sound of their projects, and I wrote to them and said, oh, could I write something for your project? Actually, there were 4. One of them said, well, actually, I've got enough people, but thank you anyway. And then 3 of them said, oh, yes. So I got to know a few people that way as well. And then I thought, actually, this is quite a good idea, because I thought, in a way, a topic like what if life were meant to be easy is bigger than just me. So in January, the idea of the project then, the title then was inviting ease and flow, or inviting greater ease and flow into everyday life. And I asked a bunch of friends then just to write about their own experiences of ease and flow, based on this concept of what if life were meant to be easy. And almost without exception, the essays that I got started off by saying, life isn't easy, it's hard. But then explaining that they had actually found ease, and usually after some sort of crisis, usually a health crisis or burnout at work or losing a job or whatever, or various life things that suddenly make you kind of go, oh, maybe things need to be different or whatever, or you just go through a change of mindset somehow. So the two things that I kind of took away from that was, first of all, anybody can find ease, because I wasn't sure about that. I mean, Karen probably knows I keep talking about what an easy life I've had. I sort of bore people to tears with, oh yes, my life's been so easy. And they say, but hang on a second, aren't you living with cancer at the moment? Yeah, but, apart from that. So I didn't know whether this idea of ease was something totally alien to everybody else, or whether it was something that other people could embrace. So it was interesting, as I say, that every single person that wrote an essay said that they did eventually discover ease. For some people, one friend in particular said it was after half a lifetime of hard. And almost without exception, finding ease came after a crisis. So I started to think, okay, as I say, ease is available to everybody. And the second thing was, if we can find ease after a crisis, what stops us from finding ease before a crisis? And then shortly after the project, I spoke to another friend who was going through a bit of a difficult time at work, was feeling a bit stressed out. And I said to her, well, what I've learned from this project is that ease is often found after a crisis. So if you're going to have a crisis, I suggest you have it soon and make it as short as possible.
And Julia, I really love that, because what you're saying there is that, for most people, they need that crisis in order to find ease. Whereas what you're saying is, and someone from the outside looking in can say, well, you've had cancer several times. This is the crisis that's brought you to a place of ease. But what's really interesting is that's not the case. No. You're saying that it's always been easy for you. You've always found that life, I mean, I think the title of your blog was, taking life as it comes, wasn't it, at one point? And it's like, and I mean, I've known you quite a while now, but I've just always known you to be very calm. And just like you say, you don't plan. I just find that your whole philosophy is a lot of people, more people should hear about, because it is just a reframe in your mind every day, and everything that goes on around you, you can either turn around and say, well, I'm the victim, life's happening to me, and that doesn't mean to say we stop what's going on out there, but it is totally up to us on how we respond to it, and we can choose to be fraught and frantic, or anxious, or angry or whatever, and we can also choose to be calm and accepting, and then but still move forward.
I think one thing, and I would love to hear what you have to say about Julia, is in that choice, the realization that choosing to look at things differently still may mean having to go through a process of getting there to actually experience that. That's like in the work I do, I often talk about you have awareness and you have action, but there is that piece of acceptance in the middle, and not the how well it's the way it is kind of acceptance, but saying right now this is the way it is. Now I'm going to take actions from there. And I think a lot of people, when they become aware, what you're saying, Karen, as well, is that they think, oh yeah, I'm going to choose not to worry, but they're not accepting yet that at this moment in time they actually do worry, and then they feel not worrying, and then they tell themselves they shouldn't be worrying, and they worry even more about not worrying. And so one of the things I actually, from what you were saying, is because I hear you say part of it is that, you know, that the not planning and an element of ease that was always there for you, that it kind of seems nearly like a sort of, your natural way of being, of, as you mentioned, not planning and stuff, but then also an element of, with the not worrying, for instance, the making, like particularly after the meltdown, as you called it, the choice not to worry. So can you say a little bit about, because again, it's that making the choice, but did you do something to actually go there? Like for me, I often know with people, it's that difference between affirmation style, telling yourself you should think differently, to through your practice actually experience it differently. But it would be interesting to hear from you, like those elements, right? Because I think that element where it's coming from you naturally, that's obviously very hard for someone else. They can feel calm in your presence, but they might not have that natural feeling coming up. They have it still inside somewhere, but they might not be able to reach that without something. Can you say a little bit about that, about how for you the element of natural, and then the thing where you chose and your practice around that?
I mean, the meltdown that I had when I was 18, there were various things going on. You know, I was being bullied at school, for example, and by one of the teachers as well. And as I say, this panic about what am I going to do for the rest of my life? And I really didn't have a clue. And it also kind of materialized, this anxiety that I obviously had, as I just kept choking on food, you know, mostly chocolate, but to the point where I couldn't breathe. And I was always on my own at the time, and it was terrifying. And I just stopped eating, or pretty much stopped eating. So my mum took me to the doctor, and the doctor put me on tranquilizers. So for about 6 months I was on tranquilizers and just go to school, doing exams, whatever. Not really being that aware of what I was doing, perhaps. And at the same time, I started reading some novels about a Tibetan Buddhist monk who moved to Canada. I actually bought one of the books again. I started reading it again because I thought, I must have a look to see if anything came out of that. You know, is that where I learned how to be like I am? I just kind of remember that he was quite matter of fact about life and death and this sort of thing. And, you know, when somebody dies, they don't bury them under the ground. You know, they leave them out in the open for carrion birds or whatever to feed off. You know, and it sounds quite horrific, perhaps, to people in the West, but it kind of makes sense. You know, everybody's got to eat. So, as I say, there might be something that I learned from reading these books. And then I just remember one day I was going to take my tranquilizer tablet. And I just thought, I can't take these for the rest of my life. So I might as well stop now. So I just stopped. And around the same time, as I say, I came to the conclusion that nothing in life is worth worrying about, which might have come from what I was reading in these novels. I'm not really sure, because I hadn't worried before. I mean, this was the thing, you know, I just used to be, I mean, the thing is, I live in the present moment even now, and I think as a child I did as well. I think we all do, but at some point we forget. But I think I was still very curious about life, and you know, just having fun. And I mean, I spent a month in Germany when I was 15 with my pen friend's family, because my teacher had told me I had to go. And I wasn't really the sort of person that would disagree at that age. But I had a fantastic time. I mean, it was terrifying in lots of different ways. You know, I'd never been abroad before. I'd never been on holiday without my family. I'd never flown. I was claustrophobic, so being in a plane was a bit of a challenge. And I didn't really speak German. You know, I knew grammar, but I didn't know how to string a sentence together, really. We hadn't practiced that. So it was, you know, really outside of my comfort zone. So again, I suppose you could say that was a crisis in a way, but or a challenge. You see, because I believe very much that we can set ourselves challenges, you know, positive or creative challenges. It doesn't have to be stuff that happens. You know, we can kind of push ourselves. Yeah, I'm just thinking about, you know, making this decision, the decision not to, or the choice not to worry. I can be quite left brain sometimes, quite logical and rational, which is how come I did so well in IT, I think. But I'm also very creative, so it's quite a good balance. But to me, I mean, I'll give an example more recently when I did start to worry, because I'm not immune. I mean, I think that's the thing, you know, it's things happen and you start to worry about something. So,
and just to say, I think that's important for people who are listening to this and think like, how can I do that to not worry? So that it's not that there is never worry coming up. Not that there's never a situation that you like, because I think you mentioned it earlier as well about something that you for a moment went into the like, oh my God, what do I do with that? But then going into, so I think that's important for people to realize that the being in a state where you choose and also actually practice not worrying doesn't mean you never feel worry at all. Do I get that correctly? Is that what
yes, I think that's right. And in fact, you mentioned practice, because another friend of mine says she doesn't worry and that it's the practice for her. So I don't quite know what she does to practice not worrying, because for me it definitely is a choice.
Yeah.
And I think it always has been. I didn't have to do anything, you know, I don't have a 6-step process or something, or
but
a 2-step
is there a moment
process.
actually to ask, because is there a moment though that, for instance, because you did mention like that there is a situation where also for you worry does arise, but then in that moment you choose. So is that aware, the being aware of that it arises and making a conscious decision or choosing consciously in that moment to not worry, would you call that your practice?
Yes, and not necessarily in that moment. So for example, you know, I had one of the health challenges, you know, with cancer. I was just really unwell for a couple of months. You know, I was sleeping all the time. I was just so exhausted. And as I gradually started to get better, I started to worry about what if this came back, because it was actually cancer had spread to the brain, which freaked me out in the first place anyway, because, you know, that's the last thing you feel you want, sort of thing. But I've got over that because, you know, it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. But I started to worry, well, what if it came back and I had this same problem of, I mean, it doesn't sound so bad, you know, you sleep all day, every day, but for 2 months, you know, I didn't have the energy to stand up to make a sandwich. That's how exhausted I was. And when I used to go for treatment to the hospital, I had to lie down and I would fall asleep then as well. So as I say, I started to worry. And it probably went on for about 2 weeks. And I only worried at night, because at night I couldn't sleep so well as during the day, for some odd reason. And then one day I just thought, this is ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense, because worrying doesn't actually change the outcome. It just makes you feel bad in the meantime. So that was it. That was the end of worrying. Which is why I say I'm quite a logical person. Maybe it's a stretch for some people just to be able to say, well, this doesn't make sense, so I'm not going to do it anymore. And I don't know whether this is relevant to that. I remember when I was 11, my form teacher asked a question of everybody in the class. If your friends stuck their head in a fire bucket, would you do the same? And I thought, no, don't be silly. But as you no doubt know, there are other pressures like peer pressure. You want to be like everybody else, or being ill, or being anxious, or whatever. There are benefits because people are nice to you. They look after you, and they're more gentle with you than perhaps they would be if you were fighting fit, kind of thing. So you have to kind of throw all of that out of the window, though, and just say, well, but is this what I want? Like I was saying, as long as I am able to do the things I want to do, and some of that over the past few months, the past 2 years, has been, well, it would be nice to be able to do the washing, to wash some clothes, because I just didn't have the energy for several months at a time. So then when I do have some energy, I kind of catch up, and then of course it builds up again. So, but it is just about doing what you can at the time, and not worrying about it. This is the thing, we might sort of think, or I might think, oh, I haven't got any clean clothes, and oh, it's, what would people think if they knew that I've used up all the clothes I have because, I haven't done any washing, or whatever. But does it really matter? And I suppose that, does it really matter? Is a good question. And when things, I think, when things get really bad, which, occasionally they do, I realised when I was writing my essay for the project in January, the thing that always comes up for me is, I'm worth more than this. And it's about self-care and self-love. Self-love is more difficult for some people to swallow, I suppose, but self-care, and that as an individual you matter. And nobody's going to take as good care of you as you can yourself.
Thank you for listening. Did you enjoy this episode? Do share your thoughts and questions in the comments, or send us a message.
Do you know someone else who'd be interested in our Curious Conversations? Please share and spread the word. You can find out more about us at KarenRavel.com
and TessaVanKeken.com. Tune in next week for another Curious Conversation.